The air in the small, dusty records room felt thick and suffocating. Files lined the metal shelves, silent witnesses to the confrontation unfolding within. Marcus Thorne, the CFO of Summit Ridge Investments, stood across from me, his expression unreadable. "Your meticulous approach is no longer required here, Olivia," Thorne stated, his voice dripping with disdain. He leaned against a filing cabinet, arms crossed. "Frankly, your type is a detriment to the organization." His words, sharp and dismissive, hung heavy in the cramped space. He didn't offer papers, no formal documentation, just a cold, verbal dismissal. "This is your notice. Your termination paperwork will be mailed to you." I stared back at him, my mind racing but my face betraying nothing. Olivia Vance, Principal Financial Analyst, Summit Ridge Investments. That title, earned through years of hard work and dedication at SRI, suddenly felt meaningless. A strange, icy calm settled over the turmoil churning inside me. 6 years I'd poured into this company, countless late nights analyzing figures, building models, ensuring accuracy. And this insult, this dismissal in a forgotten corner of the office, was the culmination. He was forcing me to choose between complicity and my career, but the choice had already been made, deep within my unwavering ethical core. "I won't falsify financial statements for the audit," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady, cutting through his casual cruelty. "Not for you, not for Thorne, not for anyone." Thorne's thin lips tightened into a sneer, his eyes cold and calculating. "Then I believe we have nothing further to discuss." He picked up a meticulously prepared analysis report from a nearby desk, my report, the one I'd stayed late completing just last night. With a careless flick of his wrist, he tossed it into the overflowing trash bin beside the shredder. The gesture was deliberate, a final act of contempt. "You need to vacate the premises immediately," Thorne commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Now, there were no arguments, no pleas, no outward display of the anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I simply held his gaze, my eyes burning with a silent fury he couldn't comprehend. Summit Ridge Investments, or SRI, was a mid-sized real estate investment firm headquartered in Maple Creek, a bustling city nestled in the heart of New England. I had joined when it was smaller, playing a key role in developing the analytical frameworks that helped build its reputation. Thorne himself escorted me back to my desk in the open-plan office on the main floor. I could feel the uncomfortable weight of my colleagues' eyes as we walked. Some quickly averted their gazes, feigning sudden interest in their monitors, clearly unnerved by the spectacle. Others watched with poorly concealed curiosity, whispering amongst themselves. Chloe Jenkins, my bright and capable financial analyst, rushed towards me, her eyes welling with tears. She opened her mouth to speak, but Thorne stepped swiftly between us, a silent, imposing barrier. "Ms. Vance is leaving," he announced curtly to the surrounding cubicles. "Focus on your work." He gestured towards my desk. "Personal belongings only. Company laptop, phone, access badge, leave them." I nodded mutely, my movements deliberate as I began emptying my drawers into a plain cardboard box I found nearby. Framed photos, a picture of me crossing the finish line at a marathon, another of my parents, my favorite coffee mug. A well-worn copy of a statistical analysis textbook. Each item felt heavy, imbued with the weight of 6 years of my professional life. What none of them knew, was that this moment hadn't caught me entirely unprepared. For months, ever since the first suggestion to bend the numbers, I had been preparing for this possibility, this ugly outcome. I had been meticulously documenting every questionable directive from Thorne and Croft. I archived incriminating emails to encrypted cloud storage, saved copies of internal memos, even discreetly recorded voice notes after tense meetings where a creative accounting was discussed for the upcoming audit. The digital breadcrumbs were carefully laid, waiting. At 38, with a master's degree in accounting from Maple Creek State University and years of experience, I was far from naive. The pressure to adjust financial records had started subtly 3 months ago, masked as strategic reinterpretation. I recognized the pattern instantly. I'd seen similar red flags ignored at a previous company, a mistake I regretted and wouldn't repeat. Those subtle hints had escalated, morphing into direct, undeniable demands from Thorne. It was a familiar, sickening trajectory heading straight towards fraud. As Thorne watched me pack, his presence a constant, suffocating pressure. I remembered the sting of my ex-husband David's words from 3 years ago. "You're too rigid, Olivia," he'd said during one of our final arguments before the divorce. "Life isn't a balance sheet you can just reconcile." Perhaps he had a point about life, but in the world of finance and ethics, precision and rigidity were my shields, my anchors. Right now, they were my only weapons. Box in hand, I walked through the polished lobby of the SRI building for the last time under Thorne's watchful eye. I caught my reflection in the gleaming glass doors, dark hair pulled back neatly, expression carefully composed. A mask hiding the turbulent storm of anger and betrayal within. I wasn't just leaving a job, I was leaving behind a part of my professional identity. But I was also standing firm on the bedrock of my principles, a decision whose consequences would ripple far beyond these walls. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Marcus Thorne and Julian Croft, the CEO who enabled him, would begin to understand the consequences of dismissing the one person who knew exactly where the financial bodies were buried. They had underestimated the quiet resolve of the woman who always did things by the book. No exceptions. My condo, usually a sanctuary of calm high above the Maple Creek city lights, felt different that night. It transformed into a command center, a war room dedicated to exposing the truth. Spread across my sleek dining table weren't dinner plates, but printed copies of emails, highlighted financial statements, and annotated meeting notes, physical duplicates of the digital arsenal I had painstakingly curated over the past few difficult months. I was always the careful one, the analyst who double-checked everything, the keeper of meticulous records. It was my greatest professional strength, the bedrock of my reputation. David had called it rigidity, the fatal flaw in our marriage. But tonight, that meticulous nature was my shield and my sword. Precision was everything. I powered up my personal laptop, navigating through layers of security to access the encrypted files stored securely in the cloud. Past emails with coded language, Thorne's voice memo demanding alterations to reports, transaction records that screamed impropriety, it was all there. I reviewed the draft email I had composed earlier that day, addressed not just to the 7 members of Summit Ridge Investments Board of Directors, but also to the company's external auditors and legal counsel. The message was stark, factual, devoid of emotion. It simply laid out the unvarnished truth, supported by dozens of meticulously organized attachments, irrefutable proof of systematic financial misrepresentation orchestrated by Thorne and tacitly approved, or at least willfully ignored, by Croft. My finger hovered over the send button. A wave of doubt washed over me, cold and sharp. Was I truly ready for the inevitable storm? Firing off this email was crossing the Rubicon. There would be no retreat, no going back. I would become a whistleblower, a pariah to some, perhaps a hero to others, but irrevocably marked. My career as I knew it would be over. Just then, my phone buzzed. A secure message on Signal from Chloe. "They're already spinning it," she wrote, the words tight with anger. "Telling people you resigned because you couldn't handle the pressure. Thorne already interviewed your potential replacement this afternoon, even before he spoke to you. Be careful, Olivia." Chloe's loyalty, her quiet act of courage in warning me, solidified my resolve. The calculated cruelty, the premeditated nature of it all, it fueled the cold fire within me. That was all the confirmation I needed. I clicked send. Then, for added insurance, I opened the Tor browser, navigating the anonymizing network to a secure third-party whistleblower platform. I uploaded the core evidence package there too, creating another layer of disclosure they couldn't easily control or bury. Done. Within moments, the digital bombshells had landed. The truth was out, disseminated through multiple channels. Now, all I could do was wait for the fallout. I poured myself a much-needed glass of wine, the deep red liquid swirling in the glass. Stepping onto my small balcony, I gazed out at the glittering tapestry of Maple Creek spread below. The city lights seemed both beautiful and indifferent tonight. 6 years ago, I had joined SRI, then a smaller, more focused firm, filled with optimism about its mission to back ethical real estate developments. But as the company grew, so did the pressure for profit above all else. The culture shifted subtly at first, then drastically. Ethics became inconvenient obstacles rather than guiding principles. 3 months ago, Thorne's first suggestion, to tweak debt-to-equity ratios to impress a potential major investor, Cypress Holdings Group. I had voiced my concerns, citing regulations and best practices. He'd brushed them off, laughing, calling it his standard industry practice, and telling me not to be so naive. That conversation set off alarm bells. 2 months ago, a direct instruction from Thorne to reclassify significant expenses. Clearly intended to artificially inflate the quarterly earnings report. I documented the conversation immediately afterward, saving the voice note. My secret evidence gathering began in earnest. 1 month ago, the explicit order from Thorne to create a complex shell subsidiary, designed solely to hide underperforming assets from the impending audit. That was the point of no return. I knew then my time at SRI was limited. I just hadn't anticipated the sheer brutality of the dismissal. Looking out at the skyline, a familiar pang of loneliness hit me, quickly followed by a surge of determination. How many other companies, hidden behind those gleaming facades, were playing the same dangerous games? How many other finance professionals were trapped in the same ethical vice, pressured to compromise their integrity day after day? The response came faster than I could have imagined. By 8 a.m. the next morning, my phone was ringing. Caller ID showed it was Ms. Evelyn Hayes, the chairwoman of the SRI board. I'd always regarded Ms. Hayes as the most principled member of the leadership team, a respected figure from the company's founding days. "Olivia," she began, her voice grave but measured, "we received your email and the attached documentation. An emergency board meeting has been called for noon today via secure video conference. The evidence you've provided is deeply concerning, to say the least." A pause. "Would you be willing to join the call briefly to answer some preliminary questions?" "Yes, Ms. Hayes," I replied calmly. "I'll be available." I spent the morning meticulously organizing my digital evidence, creating a concise timeline, and preparing key points for my statement. No emotion, just facts. At precisely noon, I clicked the secure link provided and joined the video conference. Ms. Hayes appeared on screen, her expression serious, flanked virtually by the other 6 board members, their faces a mixture of shock, concern, and, in a couple of cases, barely concealed hostility. "The board has conducted a preliminary review of your materials, Ms. Vance," Ms. Hayes began formally after brief introductions. "We have also consulted with external legal counsel regarding the necessary next steps. However, before we proceed further with internal actions, we need to hear directly from you about the sequence of events." For the next 30 minutes, I calmly, methodically walked them through everything. I started with the initial, subtle pressures to polish the numbers, escalating to Thorne's explicit directives to falsify data for the audit. I detailed his mounting pressure, the veiled threats, and the final, insulting dismissal when I refused to comply. I presented the timeline clearly, referencing specific documents and dates. "And you possess documentation for all these allegations?" asked Mr. Samuel Chin, one of the more skeptical board members, his tone sharp. "Every significant instance is documented, Mr. Chan," I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily through the camera. Emails, time-stamped internal memos, voice recordings were permissible under New England's one-party consent laws. And discrepancies I noted in financial drafts compared to source data. I have been a principal financial analyst for several years, and I understand the critical importance of verifiable evidence. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably. Their expressions told the story. They believed me, or at least, they believed the evidence I possessed. More importantly, they understood the legal jeopardy the company, and potentially they themselves, were now in. Failure to act decisively would make them complicit. "Thank you for your clarity and courage, Ms. Vance," Ms. Hayes finally said, breaking the tension. Her tone conveyed a measure of respect. "Please remain available. Our legal team, separate from SRI's counsel, will likely be in touch shortly." The call ended. 3 hours later, an email alert popped up. An urgent press release from Summit Ridge Investments. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked the link. The carefully worded statement announced the immediate suspension, pending a full independent investigation, of CFO Marcus Thorne and CEO Julian Croft due to alleged financial improprieties. It mentioned SRI had self-reported the matter to the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) and pledged full cooperation with regulatory inquiries. My phone rang almost instantly. It was Chloe, her voice a hushed whisper filled with nervous energy. "Olivia, the office is absolute chaos," she breathed. "Security just escorted Thorne and Croft out of the building. Like, perp walk style, in front of everyone. People are freaking out, talking about the SEC auditors. Her voice trembled slightly. What did you do? I told the truth, Chloe, I said softly, a wave of relief washing over me, mingled with apprehension about what lay ahead. I just told the truth. That evening, a formal email arrived from Ms. Hayes requesting a secure, one-on-one video call the following day. A part of me braced for a settlement offer. Hush money tied to an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, the standard corporate playbook for managing inconvenient whistleblowers. As I was preparing for bed, sorting through the day's emotional whirlwind, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. It was a message from a former colleague, now a senior manager at Novasight Technologies, a respected tech firm in the region. Olivia, heard whispers about what went down at SRI, it read. Your courage is admirable. Coincidentally, we're actively searching for a new finance director with impeccable ethics and strong analytical skills. Might you be interested in a confidential conversation? Unexpected tears pricked my eyes, tears of relief, validation, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of pride. I had risked everything, my entire career, betting on the fundamental value of integrity. And now, the first tentative sign appeared suggesting that bet might pay off. Still, as sleep finally claimed me, a deep-seated unease remained. This fight was far from over. The real battles, the ones involving powerful people and hidden agendas, were only just beginning. Morning would bring new challenges, new fronts in this war for truth. The following morning, Summit Ridge Investments. Stock ticker painted a grim picture, down nearly 15% in pre-market trading by the time I logged on for my scheduled video call with Ms. Hayes. News of the suspensions and the SEC notification had clearly spooked investors. Ms. Hayes appeared on screen promptly at the agreed time, her expression composed but weary. She was alone. Thank you for making time for this, Olivia, she began without preamble. As you know, the board has initiated a full-scale independent investigation led by an external firm. However, the board felt it crucial to understand your perspective directly on how pervasive these issues might be within SRI. Before we delve deeper, she continued, her gaze steady, I want to assure you that your confidentiality is paramount in this conversation. We recognize your position as a whistleblower, and your rights under the law will be fully respected. Her directness was appreciated, though a kernel of professional skepticism remained. Protecting the company's liability was likely as high a priority as protecting me. Thank you, Ms. Hayes, I replied evenly. I appreciate that assurance. Olivia, your nearly 2 decades of experience in financial analysis and compliance are invaluable, she stated. Wait. Actually, it's closer to 17 years since grad school, Ms. Hayes, I corrected gently but firmly. It seemed a small detail, perhaps insignificant to her, but in my world, precision was paramount. Accuracy mattered, especially now. Ms. Hayes nodded slightly, acknowledging the correction. My apologies. 17 years. We hope you can help us grasp the full scope of this situation. For the next hour, I walked her through the timeline again, this time adding more context about the cultural shift within SRI. I explained how the focus on short-term gains, driven largely by Thorne but seemingly unchecked by Croft or the board, had created an environment where ethical corners were increasingly cut. I detailed how Thorne had deliberately compartmentalized the fraudulent practices, assigning different pieces of the puzzle to various team members, ensuring only he, and, inadvertently, I, due to my central role in analyzing overall financial data, could see the complete, distorted picture. How many others within the finance team do you believe were knowingly complicit, beyond Thorne and Croft? Ms. Hayes asked. Her pen poised over a notepad. Based on direct evidence, emails, documented instructions, specific data manipulations I traced, I can only definitively point to Thorne and Croft, I replied cautiously. Several others on the team likely had suspicions, or perhaps saw isolated irregularities. But Thorne was adept at using jargon, pressure, and plausible deniability to keep most mid-level staff focused only on their specific tasks. Ms. Hayes leaned closer to her camera, her expression intent. Olivia, I'm going to be very direct. The board is prepared to offer you immediate reinstatement. Not just reinstatement, but a significant promotion to Vice President of Financial Integrity, a newly created role, with a substantial compensation package reflecting its importance. We need someone with your proven ethical standards and deep institutional knowledge to help us navigate this crisis and fundamentally correct our course. The offer blindsided me. I had anticipated legal maneuvers, settlement discussions, maybe even veiled threats, but not this. A promotion? A leadership role forged in the very fire I had ignited? I took a moment, choosing my words with extreme care. Ms. Hayes, I appreciate the board's confidence, I began slowly. But with all due respect, I'm not certain returning to SRI is the right decision, for me, or for the company's credibility. Ms. Hayes looked genuinely surprised, perhaps even a little affronted. She wasn't a leader accustomed to having offers of this magnitude declined. May I ask why, Olivia? The compensation and authority would be considerable. Because, Ms. Hayes, the issues at SRI run deeper than just Thorne and Croft, I stated plainly, holding her gaze. The board of directors has been receiving quarterly financial reports for years. You approved substantial executive bonuses tied directly to financial metrics that, upon objective review, appear highly questionable. If not outright implausible, given market conditions and underlying asset performance. I let the statement hang in the virtual air between us. Either the board, collectively, failed in its fundamental fiduciary duty of oversight, I continued, my voice calm but firm, or, perhaps, some members were aware, or at least suspected, and chose to look the other way as long as the stock price climbed. The silence on the other end was profound. Ms. Hayes's expression became guarded. That is a very serious allegation, Ms. Vance, she said finally, her voice tight with controlled tension. It's an observation based purely on the financial data and documented board approvals, Ms. Hayes. I countered respectfully but without backing down. Analyzing such data is, after all, my area of expertise. And it's precisely why I believe my credibility as the whistleblower, and frankly, the credibility of any internal reform effort, would be irrevocably compromised if I were immediately placed back onto SRI's payroll in a position of power created under these circumstances. The conversation concluded shortly after, politely but without resolution on the offer. As I disconnected the call, I noticed a new email notification. Sender, U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement. Subject, Request for Interview, Summit Ridge Investments Matter. The federal investigation was officially moving forward, targeting me as a key witness. And I had just turned down the company's attempt to pull me back into its troubled orbit. Logging off, a surprising sense of lightness settled over me. The path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, fraught with potential legal battles and professional repercussions. But for the first time in a long time, it felt entirely my own. 3 weeks later, the media storm surrounding the SRI scandal showed no signs of abating. I found myself sitting across from Noah Riley, the sharp economic journalist from a major national newspaper whose investigative pieces had thrust the story onto the national stage. We met discreetly on a park bench overlooking the river, far from the prying eyes and listening ears of downtown Maple Creek cafes. What began as a regional business story had exploded into a symbol of corporate malfeasance, sending tremors through the entire real estate investment sector. Just confirming, Olivia, Riley said, flipping through his digital notepad. You're still comfortable with me quoting you directly on the timeline leading up to Thorne forcing you out? I nodded, glancing at the draft article displayed on his tablet. The crisp autumn air felt good after weeks cooped up analyzing documents and talking to lawyers. Everything attributed to me is accurate, Riley. But remember our ground rules. The focus remains on corporate accountability and the systemic failures, not on personal grievances. Understood, he affirmed, pocketing the tablet. Though a personal angle always resonates with readers. He gave me a sideways glance. Off the record, any thoughts on SRI's stock hitting a 5-year low this morning? Must feel like some kind of vindication. I watched a rowing boat glide silently across the water before answering. Honestly, Riley, I take no pleasure in the company's struggles, I said sincerely. I helped build SRI. Many good, honest people still work there, and their jobs and savings are now at risk because of the actions of Thorne and Croft. And the inaction of the board. He looked momentarily disappointed by the lack of vengeful sentiment but dutifully made a note. Fair point. What about the SEC? My sources indicate you've met with investigators from the Division of Enforcement multiple times now. I can't comment on any aspect of an ongoing federal investigation, I replied automatically, the phrase becoming a familiar refrain. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing. An incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it, especially now. But a gut feeling, honed by recent events, urged me to answer. Olivia Vance speaking, I said quietly, stepping a few feet away from the bench. Ms. Vance, good afternoon. This is Patrick Doyle, Chief Financial Officer at Ironwood Financial Group. Ironwood, one of SRI's fiercest competitors. My internal radar went on high alert. Mr. Doyle. Yes. I realize this call is unexpected, but I've been following the news regarding SRI with great interest. I was wondering if you might be open to a brief, confidential conversation about a potential opportunity at Ironwood. Intriguing, and potentially dangerous. I agreed to a preliminary video call for the following day and ended the call quickly, my mind racing. I returned to Riley, who was observing me with keen journalistic curiosity. Another job offer, he guessed, a slight smile playing on his lips. If I didn't know better, I'd say being a high-profile whistleblower is good for your career prospects. It was disturbingly true. Since Riley's first major article broke, my LinkedIn inbox had been flooded with inquiries from recruiters and executives at various financial firms. My actions had made me a pariah in some circles but, paradoxically, a highly sought-after commodity in others, particularly those wanting to signal a commitment to ethical governance, or perhaps, cynically, acquire insider knowledge about a competitor. Would you believe me if I told you it was a cold call about my car's extended warranty? I deflected with a weak smile. Riley chuckled. Not a chance, Vance. His expression shifted, becoming more serious. Listen, Olivia, before my next piece goes live, there's something else you should be aware of. My research is starting to uncover potential links between SRI's fraudulent activities and Cypress Holdings Group. Change. The giant private equity firm Thorne had been so desperate to impress. A chill traced its way down my spine despite the mild weather. What kind of links are we talking about, Riley? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Unusual capital flows between SRI projects and obscure CHG subsidiaries, overlapping directorships on shell corporations. Whispers of similar, creative accounting practices at other companies CHG has invested in, he elaborated, lowering his voice. I'm starting to think SRI wasn't an isolated case. It might be part of a much larger pattern orchestrated or enabled by Cypress. If Riley's suspicions were correct, my internal reporting hadn't just exposed fraud at one mid-sized firm. I might have inadvertently pulled a thread that could unravel something far bigger, far more systemic. And that meant some very powerful, very wealthy people associated with Cypress might now view me as a significant threat. As if summoned by the thought, my phone vibrated again. Not a call this time, but a notification. An alert from my email provider about multiple suspicious login attempts on my personal account originating from overseas IP addresses. Blocked, thankfully. Almost immediately after, a new email arrived from an obviously spoofed address. No subject line. The body contained only 6 words. Cypress Holdings Group. Stay away. Warning. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a vague text message. This was targeted, indicating they knew who I was and likely knew I was digging deeper. My hand trembled slightly as I showed the email and the login alert to Riley. His eyes widened, the professional curiosity replaced by genuine concern. Okay, this is serious, he murmured. Cyber harassment, maybe worse. Are you reporting this to the SEC? To the FBI. I took screenshots, immediately forwarding them to Sophia Ramirez, the specialized whistleblower attorney I had retained. Already sent to Sophia, I confirmed, trying to control the tremor in my voice. She'll handle the official reporting. The anonymous email, coupled with the attempted hack, didn't just confirm Riley's fears and my own growing suspicions. It solidified them. I hadn't just stumbled upon corporate fraud. I had stumbled into a shadowy intersection of high finance and potentially criminal conspiracy involving Cypress, one of North America's largest investment firms. The question was no longer if I should dig deeper. The question was, how dangerous would it be? The video conference call with Ironwood Financial Group convened the next afternoon. On screen were Patrick Doyle, the CFO who had initially contacted me, Isabella Rossi, Ironwood's formidable CEO, and a third individual introduced as Jasmine Kaur, their chief audit executive. The digital backdrop behind them depicted a sleek, modern office overlooking a generic cityscape, polished and impersonal. Ms. Vance, thank you for agreeing to speak with us on such short notice, Ms. Rossi began, her voice smooth and authoritative after the initial exchange of pleasantries. We'll be direct. We at Ironwood have been observing the situation at Summit Ridge Investments with considerable interest. Your integrity and analytical rigor under pressure have not gone unnoticed. Mr. Doyle nodded in agreement. In today's complex regulatory environment, ethical leadership in finance isn't just desirable, it's essential. We need leaders who possess not only deep technical expertise but also unwavering moral courage. Ms. Rossi leaned slightly forward, her gaze intense. To that end, Olivia, may I call you Olivia? We would like to offer you the position of Chief Ethics Officer at Ironwood Financial Group. This is a newly established C-suite role, reporting directly to me, with significant autonomy, full board access, and a substantial budget to build your own team and implement best-in-class compliance protocols. The offer was stunning. Not just a senior management role, but a top executive position explicitly focused on ethics, tailor-made, it seemed. For someone with my recent experience, it held far more potential influence and compensation than my previous role at SRI. Yet, a prickle of unease persisted. That's an exceptionally generous offer, Ms. Rossi, Mr. Doyle, I replied carefully, choosing my words precisely. May I ask what specifically prompted Ironwood to create such a significant role now and extend this offer to me, given the ongoing complexities surrounding my departure from SRI? Ms. Rossi and Mr. Doyle exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible glance. Candor, Olivia? Fear, Ms. Rossi admitted with a disarming smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Not fear of you, personally, but fear of becoming the next SRI. The regulatory scrutiny on our industry is immense, and frankly, the reputational damage from a compliance failure can be catastrophic. We need someone to ensure Ironwood is not just compliant on paper, but ethically sound in practice. Ms. Kaur, the audit executive, spoke for the first time, her voice measured and precise. Additionally, Olivia, I had occasion to review some of your financial modeling work last year when Ironwood and SRI were competing bidders on the Westridge development portfolio. Your analysis was exceptionally thorough and insightful. That level of talent, combined with demonstrated integrity, is rare and highly valuable. Their explanations sounded plausible, almost convincing. Transparency, acknowledging fear, praising my work, it was a sophisticated pitch. But the timing still felt too convenient, the offer too perfect, extended too rapidly to someone still entangled in a major corporate scandal. My conversation with Riley, and the chilling warning about Cyprus, echoed in my mind. Before I could possibly consider such a significant role, I said, maintaining a neutral expression, I feel obligated to ask a potentially sensitive question. What is the nature and extent of Ironwood Financial Group's business relationship with Cyprus Holdings Group? The shift in the virtual room's atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Ms. Rossi's smile tightened fractionally. Mr. Doyle's posture became subtly more rigid. Ms. Kaur's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. Cyprus Holdings Group is a minority capital partner in a few of our larger, long-term development funds, Ms. Rossi answered smoothly, her voice carefully modulated. Standard syndication practice in deals of that scale. Why do you inquire about CHG specifically, Olivia? Now was the moment of truth. Because, Ms. Rossi, I have received credible information suggesting Cyprus may be connected to the same pattern of financial irregularities I uncovered at SRI. I stated directly, watching their reactions intently on the screen. Furthermore, subsequent to uncovering these potential links, I received what can only be interpreted as a direct threat, warning me via anonymous email to cease any inquiries related to Cyprus, coupled with attempts to breach my personal accounts. Ms. Kaur leaned forward slightly, her professional composure momentarily slipping into visible concern. What kind of threat, precisely? I described the anonymous email and the hacking attempt, omitting Riley's involvement. That is deeply disturbing, Mr. Doyle said after a beat, recovering his composure. But I fail to see the relevance to our offer of employment. It's entirely relevant, Mr. Doyle, I countered firmly. If I were to accept a chief ethics officer position, my mandate would require absolute independence to investigate any potential compliance or ethical issues thoroughly, regardless of who might be involved, including major capital partners like Cyprus. Ms. Rossi remained silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice regaining its earlier warmth, though it now felt forced. Olivia, let me reiterate our position. We are offering you this role precisely because we want to ensure Ironwood avoids becoming another headline. If you possess legitimate concerns regarding Cyprus or any other partner, bringing that insight inside Ironwood would be invaluable. Or, I interjected, testing the waters, perhaps Ironwood is already aware of certain, questionable practices associated with Cyprus. And this C-suite offer is a strategic move to bring a potential whistleblower inside, where my actions and inquiries can be monitored, managed, and ultimately controlled. The silence that followed crackled with unspoken tension. No denials were offered. No reassurances were made. Their collective lack of response was more telling than any words could have been. I believe this concludes our conversation, I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. I had my answer. Thank you for your time, Ms. Rossi, Mr. Doyle, Ms. Kaur. I ended the video call before they could respond further. As the screen went blank, I leaned back, taking a deep breath. Had I just turned down a legitimate, career-defining opportunity based on suspicion and paranoia? Or had I narrowly avoided walking directly into a gilded cage, a trap designed by the very forces I was beginning to uncover? I suspected the latter. The game was becoming more complex, and the stakes were rising rapidly. The Securities and Exchange Commission investigation proceeded with a momentum that surprised even Sofia Ramirez, my experienced whistleblower attorney. 6 weeks after I submitted my initial report and corroborating evidence, Sophia and I found ourselves seated in a sterile conference room at the SEC's regional office. Across the table sat Special Agent Bell, a seasoned investigator from the Division of Enforcement, his demeanor professional and direct. He laid out printouts detailing the charges the SEC was preparing to file. Based significantly on the extensive documentation and timeline you provided, Ms. Vance, Agent Bell explained, gesturing towards the files. The division is moving forward with charges against Mr. Thorne and Mr. Croft. Securities fraud, filing materially false financial statements, conspiracy to commit fraud, the works. Sophia nodded beside me, her expression conveying quiet satisfaction. Furthermore, Agent Bell continued, we are pursuing charges against 2 members of the SRI Board of Directors, including the former chairwoman, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, for failure to exercise their fiduciary duties and willful blindness to the ongoing fraud. Hearing Ms. Hayes's name, despite my earlier confrontation with her, sent a small pang through me. She had seemed principled, yet ultimately, the evidence indicated she hadn't acted decisively enough when it mattered. What about Cyprus Holdings Group? I asked, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Agent Bell met my gaze. The investigation into CHG's potential involvement is active and ongoing, Ms. Vance. These matters involving entities of that size and complexity, with their layers of legal protection, inevitably take more time. Sophia translated the official jargon. It means Cyprus has an army of high-priced lawyers, and building an airtight case against them will be a longer, tougher fight. I understood. SRI was just the first domino. So, what are the next steps for me? I asked, turning to Sophia. Now, we prepare for depositions, Sophia explained calmly. You'll likely be a key witness if these cases proceed to trial. And, she added, shifting gears, you begin to seriously consider what you want your professional future to look like, Olivia. That question had been a constant presence in the back of my mind. Job offers, like the one from Novasite, continued to trickle in. But the unnerving experience with Ironwood Financial Group made me deeply wary of stepping into another corporate environment, especially one potentially compromised or merely seeking ethical window dressing. As if reading my thoughts, Agent Bell slid a standard government business card across the polished table towards me. Separate from this current enforcement action, he said, when you feel ready, there are individuals within the SEC's Division of Enforcement, and potentially other regulatory bodies, who would be very interested in speaking with you. Perhaps about a specialized consulting role, leveraging your first-hand expertise in detecting sophisticated financial irregularities. I picked up the card, surprised by the suggestion. Working with federal regulators? It wasn't a path I had considered. Yet, it resonated with a certain logic. Who better to help design systems to catch corporate fraud than someone who had navigated it from the inside and brought it to light? It was an intriguing possibility, filed away for future consideration. As we were gathering our belongings to leave the federal building, Sophia paused and handed me a thick manila envelope. "One more thing, Olivia," she said, a rare, wide smile spreading across her face. "The final determination from the SEC's Office of the Whistleblower came through this morning. They've approved your award." My breath caught. "Based on the significance of the fraud exposed and the quality of the information you provided. The Commission is awarding you 15% of the total monetary sanctions collected from SRI." My fingers fumbled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was the official award letter. I scanned the document, my eyes landing on the estimated award figure. I stopped walking, nearly stumbling on the top step of the building's entrance. The number was staggering, life-altering, over $2 million. That's... I struggled to find the words. "Substantial," I finally managed, the understatement feeling absurd. Sophia's smile broadened. "That's what happens when your information leads to the successful prosecution of a fraud potentially reaching hundreds of millions in inflated valuations and investor losses. Congratulations, Olivia. You did the right thing, you faced the consequences with courage, and for once in this messy world, the system actually worked in your favor." Standing there in the bright afternoon sun, the official SEC letter clutched in my hand, a profound sense of vindication finally washed over me. It wasn't just about the money, though the financial security was undeniably welcome after months of uncertainty. It was the validation. The confirmation that my adherence to ethical principles, the very rigidity that had cost me my job and perhaps contributed to the end of my marriage, had ultimately been affirmed by the system I sought to uphold. 1 year later, the setting wasn't a sterile conference room or a tense video call, but the bright, modern office space of Vance Ethical Solutions, the consulting firm I had founded 6 months prior. Sunlight streamed through the large windows overlooking the revitalized Maple Creek downtown district. I was seated at my desk, conducting an online seminar via video conference for a group of small business owners, guiding them through the fundamentals of establishing robust internal controls and ethical compliance programs. On a screen beside mine, a chat window scrolled with thoughtful questions from the participants. Across the open-plan office space, Chloe Jenkins, now my indispensable director of operations, efficiently managed client communications and scheduling. Hiring Chloe, using a portion of the SEC Whistleblower Award as seed capital to launch the firm, had been one of the best decisions I'd made. Her loyalty, intelligence, and shared commitment to ethical business practices were invaluable. Remember, I emphasized to the seminar participants, proactive ethical frameworks aren't just about avoiding penalties. They build trust with your customers, your employees, and your investors. Integrity is ultimately good business. As the seminar concluded and I logged off, stretching slightly, Chloe walked over, holding a tablet. "Great session, Olivia," she said warmly. The feedback in the chat was overwhelmingly positive. "And good news, Novasight Technologies just signed the retainer agreement. That makes 14 active clients in just under 6 months." She grinned. "We're definitely going to need to hire another analyst soon." "We'll find the right person," I assured her, smiling back. "Someone who understands that the numbers have to be right, but the principles behind them matter even more." As Chloe turned back to her workstation, a news alert popped up on my monitor. Headline: Former Summit Ridge Investments CFO Marcus Thorne sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for securities fraud. I clicked the link, briefly scanning the article detailing the culmination of the SEC case and subsequent Department of Justice prosecution. Thorne received 8 years. Croft, who had cooperated later in the investigation, received a lesser sentence of 3 years. Ms. Hayes and the other board member received substantial fines and were barred from serving on public company boards. Justice, it seemed, had finally, methodically, balanced its books. I felt no surge of triumph, no vindictive pleasure at Thorne's downfall. Just a quiet, somber acknowledgement that accountability, though often slow and imperfect, was possible. My fight hadn't been about personal revenge or destroying careers. It had been about exposing the truth, about defending the integrity of the financial systems we rely on. It was about proving that ethical conduct wasn't a liability, but the most valuable asset of all. Closing the news tab, I turned my attention back to the tasks at hand, preparing for the next client strategy meeting. SRI, under entirely new leadership and stringent regulatory oversight, was slowly attempting to rebuild its shattered reputation. But Vance Ethical Solutions was looking forward, helping other organizations build resilience against the pressures that had nearly destroyed SRI and my own career. In the end, perhaps the most meaningful victory wasn't exposing the rot in my former company, but cultivating something positive and constructive from the ashes. Building a future, for myself and my clients, grounded in the very principles I had refused to compromise. Chloe, I called out, my voice clear and focused. Let's start the prep for the Nova site kickoff meeting. 10 minutes? You got it, boss, she replied cheerfully. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt bright with possibility.